This is a fingerprint, but not just any fingerprint. Oh, no, no, my friends. This is what you call a double loop whorl fingerprint. Double loop whorl fingerprint. Stick around as you will learn the difference between all 8 general patterns. I will show you how to organize them, I'll show you how to commit them to memory, and give you some tips and tricks along the way, all in this first video of this 3-part series. In the second video, I will show you how to lift prints. I will show you the difference between latent prints, visible prints, and plastic prints. And finally, I will show you how to tell the different minutiae, like ridge endings, lakes, islands, bifurcations, that kind of thing, from each other. And finally, in the third video, I will give you the chance to test your knowledge. I will show you 20 different fingerprints and give you a chance to name them correctly, and I'll give you a chance to check your minutiae comprehension by putting up on your screen 2 fingerprints and giving you the chance to determine whether or not they come from the same finger. All right, let's get right to it. So first things first, what is this FRS? Well, FRS, or friction ridge skin, that's the peaks and valleys that make up the fingers and the palms of your hands, as well as the soles of your feet. And a fingerprint then is the FRS on the fingers specifically. And there are 3 governing principles that govern fingerprints. Number 1, a fingerprint is an individualistic characteristic. In other words, no 2 fingerprints are the same. Even between your right index finger and your left index finger, for example. Even between 2 identical twins, no 2 fingerprints are the same. Number 2, a fingerprint remains unchanged throughout the life of the person. From 6 months after conception all the way until death, your fingerprints stay the same. And the third governing principle is that fingerprints have ridge patterns that can be systematically classified. All right, well, there are 3 different types of classifications: primary, secondary, and tertiary. The primary classifications are what we call general patterns. We got loops, we got arches, and we got whorls. So between those 3, there are actually 8 general patterns. We got 2 loops, 2 different kinds of arches, and 4 different kinds of whorls. Notice what I have here. There are 60% of all fingers in the whole world are loops, are one of the 2 different kinds of loops. 5% are arches and 35% are whorls. The secondary classification are what we call minutiae, or ridge characteristics. I see all these different kinds of lines, but I also see little dots and islands and lakes, bifurcations. Those are called ridge characteristics, or minutiae. And third, we have tertiary classifications, and these are the sweat pore placements. Your sweat glands in your fingers and palms of your hands lead to sweat pores, and we can actually individualize or with more certainty, we can associate or match to a common source with more certainty when we look at how close and far away and where exactly those sweat pores are. So that's tertiary classification. All right, so let's do loops, and then we'll do arches, and then we'll do whorls. What makes a loop a loop? Well, a loop must have at least one ridge entering from one side of the print recurving and going back the same side. That's what makes a loop a loop. Well, there are two different kinds. There's two subcategories of loops. If the ridges enter and exit towards your pinky finger, it's called an ulnar loop. If the ridges enter and exit towards the thumb, it's called a radial loop. So what does ulnar and radial mean? Well, these are the two bones that lead to your hand. So let's just take a look here. So here we got a skeleton, and this bottom finger here, this is your pinky finger, and therefore this bone is the ulna. This is the ulna and the pinky. The ulna is right above the pinky. This is your thumb. This is your right hand now. This is your thumb, and that's the radius. So again, here is your pinky, and this is the ulna. Well, how can you tell ulna from radius? How do you remember? Well, ulna starts with the letter U, and U is closer to U. So that's how you can kind of remember. Here's U, and here's the ulna. So the ulna is always above the pinky. And of course, the hand is supine, meaning it's facing forward. The palm is facing forward. So that's how you can tell the two apart. The ulna is above the pinky. Now, so again, if you can imagine now, if the ridge then enters and exits towards the little finger, it's called the ulnar loop because it's going towards that ulna bone. And we'll show you this here in just a second. The pattern area of the surrounding ridges that divert, those are called typelines. With loops, you have one delta and two typelines, as well as a core. Let's take a look here. All right, so this is one of my fingers on my right hand. You take a look and you tell me if you can figure out what we're looking at here. Well, I see right off the bat, I see here is a delta right here. I see ridges coming in and going out the same direction. So here is a delta. That's your delta. And on both sides of the delta, you have what we call typelines. These typelines diverge at the delta, and they go all the way around. So how again can we tell that this is a loop? Take any ridge inside of the pattern there, follow it around. If it goes in and back out in the same direction, that's called a loop. Well, since this is a finger from my right hand, and remember, my finger here is under the microscope, under the dissecting scope, so if you can just, I want you to take your right hand and have your palm facing up, so you're looking at your palm, and take a look at your pinky, and imagine your ulnar bone, the ulna, just above the pinky, and imagine yourself putting your finger under the microscope. So you're looking at any fingerprint from your right hand. Since this finger is from the right hand, and these lines, these two lines, are pointing, where are they pointing to? Are they pointing to the ulna, to the ulnar bone, or to the radius, to the ulna or to the radius? Well, they're going to your midsection, they're going to the ulna, they're going to your pinky. Therefore, this by default is an ulnar loop, because those two are pointing, because these two lines come in and go back out towards your pinky finger, which is associated with the ulna. So this is an ulnar loop. Now remember that in this picture that you're seeing here, this is not not a print that you would normally see, which is because, when people touch a surface, you're going to see the opposite. Here, I'm turning my hand the other way and just sticking my hand right under the dissecting scope, looking. So just so you're not confused. So that's loops, my friends. Those are loops. So we have ulnar loops and we have radial loops, depending on if they open up and come back towards the ulnar bone or towards the radius. Next, we have arches. We also have two different kinds of arches. These are a little bit easier here. With arches, we have plain arches and we have tented arches. Well, a plain arch just kind of goes up and back down, nice and easy. Whereas tented arches, they are really, 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 really sharp. What else do we know about arches? We know that they have no deltas and no typelines. So if you remember, with loops, we only have one delta. Loops have only one delta. With arches, they have zero. They have zero deltas. Let's take a look. All right, I see here this is a plain arch, and the reason why is because the lines that come in and out of the pattern are pretty gradual. Definitely gradual compared to the tented over here, where they come up and down really, really, really dramatically. They shoot up and shoot back down. Notice there are no deltas. There are no deltas like we just saw with the loops. Those are your arches, two different kinds. You have your plain arch and your tented arch. With whorls now, there are 4 different kinds of whorls. You got plain whorls, you have central pocket loop whorls, you got double loop whorls, and you have accidental whorls. Well, let's start with deltas. How many deltas? At least how many deltas do you have in whorls? There are 2 different. You have at least 2 deltas with all whorls. So again, with your loops have 1 delta, arches have 0 deltas, and whorls have at least 2 deltas. So can you find the deltas here on these 4 different kinds of whorls? We got one here. We got one here. Let's take a look at the central pocket loop whorl. Can you find it? There it is. And with the central pocket loop, it's the second one's usually a little bit hard to find. There it is. And even with double loops, you got 2 deltas. 1 and 2. Sometimes it's a little hard to find, and remember, next to each of these deltas, you have 2 diverging lines that go around the pattern called typelines. With accidental, here's one, and here's another. All right, well, what makes a whorl a plain whorl? Well, the first thing you do is, of course, you got to find your 2 deltas. The next thing you do is you draw a line, a straight line, between the 2 deltas. And the rule is, you find a ridge pattern that's going around in a circle inside, find a circle pattern inside. If even one crosses one of these that go around in a circle, a complete circle, if even one of them crosses that line and comes back because it's going in a full circle, if even one of them does that, you automatically call it a plain whorl. No other whorls will do this, will follow this behavior. This is called a plane whorl. All right, well, what about the central pocket loop whorl? So you notice here, well, yeah, I don't see, I mean, I do see some circles in here, but none of them would cross that line if we drew a line. Let's take a look. So let's just draw it here. Let's follow any line and any ridge pattern inside, and you can see that they all cross. They may cross, but they don't go back around. Remember, the rule was you find a ridge pattern that's going in a full circle and that will cross the line and come back. Here, we don't have that. We may have a couple here that go around, but they don't cross and come back. Therefore, this is called a central pocket loop whorl. All right, moving right on. We got the double loop whorl. And this is pretty easy, and it's pretty easy to find. And in a double loop whorl, again, you can find your deltas, but inside it looks like you have two cores that are sort of swirling, kind of like a yin yang. And that's it. It's a whorl because you have two deltas, and it's a double loop whorl because you have two sort of like these two cores in the inside. Kind of looks like a yin yang. That's your double loop whorl. And finally, the rule for accidental is one, either if you find two or more different types of patterns inside, or if it just doesn't follow any of the other rules, it's automatically called an accidental. So here we have two deltas, so that makes it a whorl, but it's not a plane whorl. It's not a central pocket loop whorl. Why? Well, I mean, I do see a pattern inside, but it almost looks like you have a second pattern inside. So that's a whorl, and it's as well as having lines come out. This makes it an accidental when you have two or more patterns, or if it doesn't follow the general rule, you have it automatically becomes an accidental. Accidentals are sort of hard to spot. They're pretty rare, but they do you will find them every once in a while. So that's your accidental whorl. All right, so that's pretty much it. So in conclusion, let's just make a table here, and let's draw in. I want you to make a little table, and I want you to practice making these loops. That way, on a test, it's easy for you. It's second nature. And again, remember that loops are. Remember these percentages. Loops make up about 60% of all fingerprints. Arches about 5%, and whorls about 35%. Remember your deltas. Your loops have 1 delta. Arches have 0, and your whorls have 2 deltas. And if we just draw this in here, your ulnar loop, if this was a right, let's see here. So now if this is an actual print and you're printing it on a sheet of paper, notice how they enter and exit towards your pinky finger, because now your hand is facing down. Your hand is not supine, but it's prone. In other words, you're actually pushing, making a print on a table on a sheet of paper. So that's why it's going the other way now, because it's not facing you. It's not looking up into a microscope. So they're going towards the ulnar bone, the ulna, which makes it the ulnar loop, an ulnar loop. If it's going this way, it's going to the thumb side. Now, if this is the right hand thumb side, that makes it a radial loop. And notice you have 1 delta for any loop. plain arch just kind of goes up and down, nice and gradual, no deltas whatsoever. But a tented arch is pretty sharp, comes up sharp and comes back down. Real dramatic. With all whorls now, you always got to have two deltas. Well, within a plain whorl, you got to have at least one circulating ridge that will cross the line and come back in. Central pocket loop will you'll have two deltas, but none of the lines that are going around in a circle will cross the line and come back. Double loop whorl, you'll have sort of two cores in there. And an accidental whorl, you're going to have two or more patterns. Here we have a double loop, and we have a line, a ridge line that will actually, a circulating ridge line that will cross and come back. So you have two or more different types of patterns, making this an accidental whorl. All right, well, I want you to take your time with this as you commit each of the 8 fingerprints to memory. Try drawing each of them by hand, just like we saw here, while explaining how each one differs from the rest. Once you feel you got a good handle, I want you then to watch the second video to go over the minutiae. And finally, you'll want to test your knowledge, assess your comprehension using the third video that I've made for you. And so you can really see what you know and what you don't know, to really test your knowledge. Thank you for your time, everyone, and your concentration. And study well, and we'll see you in the next one.